She was 23 and sleeping inside her rusted hatchback behind an abandoned gas station at the edge of a forgotten highway town. Every night, cold winds slipped through the cracked window seals and carried the smell of rainwater motor oil and wet dirt into the car, where she slept curled beneath an old wool blanket. Her name was Clara Whitmore, and everything she owned fit inside 2 faded duffel bags stacked behind the driver's seat, 3 sweaters, a coffee tin filled with loose coins, a flashlight that only worked if she hit it twice, and an envelope containing exactly $10. That was all she had left after the eviction. $10 and nowhere left to go. The old gas station where she parked had been closed for years. The pumps were wrapped in yellow tape. Weeds pushed through cracked concrete at night. Trucks thundered down the highway in the distance, while moths circled the broken fluorescent sign above her car. Sometimes she stared at that sign for hours because only half the letters still worked. SDGN. The missing letters bothered her, like something unfinished. 3 weeks earlier, she found an auction notice pinned outside the county records office. Abandoned property. Final sale. Raven Hollow Stagecoach Inn. Minimum bid $10. Everyone in town laughed when she asked about it. That place should have collapsed years ago. Nobody goes near Raven Hollow anymore. There's nothing there except rot. But $10 was all she had. And somehow that broke an old and became hers. What Clara didn't know was that something had been waiting beneath that inn for almost 80 years. Something hidden so carefully that generations had walked over it without ever knowing. And the first clue would appear on her 3rd night there, when she heard knocking beneath the floorboards. Before we continue, if stories like this pull you in the quiet kind of mysteries filled with hidden histories, second chances, and emotional discoveries, consider subscribing. And if you've ever gone through a season where life felt completely broken, share that below. Someone out there may read your words and feel a little less alone tonight. Clara grew up in a small railroad town where winters smelled like smoke from its stoves and summers tasted like dust carried across dry fields. Her grandfather, Walter Whitmore, used to repair watches at a tiny workbench beside the kitchen window. Every evening, she would sit beside him while tiny brass gears rested carefully on folded cloth beneath the yellow glow of a hanging lamp. Ticking filled the room constantly. Soft, steady, alive. Walter believed broken things deserved patience, not replacement. Patience. Everything speaks eventually, he used to tell her. While adjusting tiny watch springs with trembling fingers, you just have to stay quiet long enough to hear it. Clara never forgot that. Her mother worked double shifts at a diner off Highway 14 most nights. She came home smelling like coffee grounds and fryer grease, too tired to do anything except remove her shoes and sit silently at the kitchen table. Money disappeared faster every year. First the truck, then the savings, then the house repairs stopped happening. Rain leaked through the ceiling during storms. The porch sagged lower each winter. Still, her grandfather never complained. He simply repaired things slowly. Chair legs, cabinet hinges, old clocks, broken radios people dropped off because they trusted his hands. When Clara was 11, Walter took her to Raven Hollow for the first time. The stagecoach stood alone beyond miles of overgrown fields and dying cottonwood trees. Even back then it looked forgotten. The porch leaned slightly to one side. Windows were cloudy with age. The old stable behind the inn had partially collapsed inward. "What is this place?" Clara had asked. Walter stared at the building for a long moment before answering. A place people used to stop before continuing home. That answer confused her. "Why are we here?" He smiled faintly. "Because places remember things." Inside, dust floated through sunlight pouring between cracked shutters. The floor creaked beneath every step. Somewhere upstairs, wind moved softly through broken walls. Walter walked slowly through the building like he recognized it, like he'd been there before. Clara remembered one room clearly. A small storage room near the kitchen with stone walls that felt colder than the rest of the inn. Her grandfather paused there longer than anywhere else, not speaking, just listening. At the time, she thought nothing of it. Years later, she would remember that silence differently. Everything changed the winter Clara turned 16. Walter suffered a stroke while repairing a pocket watch. Clara found him collapsed beside the workbench, one hand still resting near tiny silver gears scattered across the floor. After the funeral, the house became unbearably quiet. No ticking. No soft humming. No smell of machine oil and cedar wood. Only silence. Her mother worked even longer hours after that. Bills piled across the kitchen table like snowdrifts. Clara started taking extra jobs after school, cleaning motel rooms, stocking shelves overnight, washing dishes. Every paycheck vanished immediately into rent and groceries. Then her mother got sick, not suddenly, slowly, quietly, the kind of illness that steals energy first, then appetite, then hope. Hospital visits became normal. Prescription bottles lined the bathroom sink. By 21, Clara had dropped out of community college to care for her full-time, and still it wasn't enough. When her mother died the following spring, the landlord gave Clara 30 days before eviction. 30 days to somehow rebuild a life that had already collapsed. She sold almost everything. Furniture, appliances, her mother's jewelry, even Walter's workbench. That one nearly broke her. The man who bought it loaded the bench into his truck, while Clara stood in the driveway, pretending not to cry. After eviction, she lived in her car. At first, she told herself it was temporary. A few weeks, maybe a month, but weeks became longer. Days blurred together. Gas station bathrooms, cheap coffee, nights listening to rain strike the roof above her head. Sometimes she drove through neighborhoods just to look at lit windows and imagine normal lives still happening inside them. Dinner tables, televisions, warm kitchens, people laughing somewhere beyond curtains. The loneliness became physical, like carrying stones inside her chest. Then came the auction notice. $10. An abandoned inn. No sane person wanted it. But Clara kept thinking about her grandfather standing silently inside that building years earlier, like he had left something unfinished there. So she bought it, and 3 days later, she drove toward Raven Hollow alone. The road to Raven Hollow barely looked like a road anymore. Tall weeds brushed against Clara's car doors as she drove slowly through narrow gravel paths surrounded by dead fields and dense cottonwood trees. Clouds hung low overhead. The farther she traveled, the quieter the world became. No stores, no houses, no traffic, only wind moving through dry branches. By late afternoon, she finally saw it, then stood at the top of a shallow hill overlooking an empty valley, washed gray beneath the cloudy sky. For a moment, Clara simply stared through the windshield. The building looked larger than she remembered, and sadder, wooden siding peeled away in long strips. Several windows were boarded shut. The porch roof sagged dangerously near one corner. Yet something about the place still felt stubbornly alive, like it refused to disappear. She stepped out slowly. The cold air smelled like wet earth and old wood. Silence stretched everywhere. Even birds seemed absent there. Clara unlocked the front door, using the rusted key provided during the auction. The hinges groaned loudly as the door opened inward. Dust, rotting pine, ancient smoke trapped inside walls. The smell hit instantly. Her flashlight beam drifted across old furniture covered in white sheets. A staircase disappearing into darkness. Faded wallpaper peeling near the ceiling. Then felt frozen in time, as if people had simply vanished mid-conversation decades earlier. That first night, Clara slept near the fireplace wrapped in blankets beside a lantern. Wind whispered constantly through cracks in the walls. Every creak made her open her eyes. Every sound felt personal. Near midnight, she heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, heavy. She froze completely. The sound stopped. Then silence. 10 minutes later, she convinced herself it was only the house settling. But sleep never fully returned. The next morning, Clara began cleaning, mostly because movement kept fear away. Dust coated everything. Dead insects filled windowsills. Mouse droppings lined old cabinets. She worked room by room, slowly opening curtains and dragging ruined furniture outside. By afternoon, she discovered strange scratch marks near the kitchen floor. Not recent. Old. Deep grooves carved into it near the pantry entrance. As if something heavy had been dragged repeatedly across the same spot years ago. She knelt beside the marks, brushing dirt away carefully. The grooves disappeared beneath a large iron shelf bolted against the wall. Odd. Why, bolt shelving into ancient floorboards. That night, while eating canned soup beside the fireplace, Clara heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. Muted, faint, below her. She lowered the spoon slowly. The sound came once more. 3 knocks, then silence. Her heart hammered so loudly she could barely breathe. Then stood miles from anyone. No neighbors. No nearby roads. Nothing beneath the floor except dirt and stone foundations. Right. She barely slept after that. The following morning, she searched beneath it using an old exterior crawl entrance half hidden behind weeds. Inside smelled like damp soil and rusted metal. Her flashlight revealed stone supports and hanging spiderwebs beneath warped beams. Nothing else. No animals. No pipes. No explanation. Yet when she climbed back upstairs, a knocking returned briefly beneath the kitchen floor. Closer this time. Almost directly beneath the pantry. Over the next week, strange details kept appearing. A cold draft near one wall despite no visible openings. A faint smell of cedar beneath the pantry floor. Tiny scraps of yellowed paper trapped between cracks in floorboards. Then Clara found the old ledger. It rested inside a collapsed desk drawer upstairs, wrapped in cloth stiff with age. Most pages were ruined by moisture, but several names remained readable. Travelers, supply deliveries, horse feed purchases, dates from the late 1930s. And one entry repeated several times beside different names. Cellar payment received. No amount listed. No explanation. Only those words. Cellar payment. Clara frowned. They already had a food cellar near the back kitchen. Why would payments involve a cellar? That evening she studied the building carefully. Room by room. Wall by wall. Something about the pantry bothered her. The dimensions felt wrong. From outside the rear section of the inn appeared longer than the interior space allowed. She measured twice. There should have been another room, hidden somewhere behind the pantry wall. But there wasn't, at least not visibly. Rain arrived hard that night. Wind shook the entire building, while branches scraped against windows like fingernails. Around midnight, Clara woke suddenly. Silence. Complete silence. Even the storm had paused. Then came the sound again. Knock, 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 directly beneath her sleeping bag. She grabbed the flashlight immediately. This time the knocking was followed by something worse. A low metallic vibration, like chains moving slowly underground. Clara stood frozen. The sound lasted maybe 5 seconds, then stopped completely. The next morning she dragged the iron pantry shelf away from the wall. It took nearly an hour. The bolts resisted violently, as if no one had moved them in decades. Behind the shelf, she found old wooden panels hidden beneath layers of grime. And near the bottom, a keyhole. Clara stared at the keyhole for a very long time. Dust clung thick around its edges. No scratches. No signs anyone had touched it in years. Her hands trembled slightly as she searched the inn for keys. Most were rusted beyond use. Some snapped immediately inside old locks upstairs. Hours passed. Nothing fit. Until sunset. Inside a small sewing tin discovered beneath loose floorboards in one bedroom, Clara found a tiny brass key wrapped carefully inside cloth. The cloth smelled faintly of cedar. Her grandfather used cedar oil constantly in his workshop. The realization made her pause. Slowly she returned downstairs. The brass key slid perfectly into the hidden keyhole. For several seconds she couldn't move. The inn felt impossibly quiet around her. Then she turned the key. Click. A deep mechanical sound echoed inside the wall. The wooden panels shifted slightly inward. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of soiled cedar wood and something metallic underneath. Clara pushed carefully. A narrow hidden door opened into darkness. Stone steps descended underground. Her flashlight beam disappeared into blackness below. Every instinct told her not to go down there alone. But curiosity had already become stronger than fear. She descended slowly. One step, then another. The air grew colder immediately. The stone walls were damp with age. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a hidden root cellar far larger than she expected. Shelves lined the walls. Old jars covered in dust rested untouched for decades. Wooden crates sat collapsed near corners. and against the far wall stood 6 massive iron lockboxes. Clara stopped breathing. The lockboxes were covered in rust, but still intact. Each carried faded markings burned into metal. RH Transit Company. Hands shaking, Clara forced open the first lid. Inside were cloth bundles stacked carefully in rows. She unwrapped one slowly. Cash. Old bills tied with string. Hundreds of them. The second box contained silver coins and jewelry wrapped inside newspapers dated 1943. The third held gold watches, pocket watches, railroad watches, some engraved, some pristine. Clara stared in disbelief. It looked less like stolen treasure and more like people's lives carefully preserved underground. Then she noticed the final box. Unlike the others, it contained no valuables, only papers, letters, photographs, and one leather journal. She opened it carefully. The handwriting inside made her freeze. Walter Whitmore, her grandfather. Clara sat slowly on the cold dirt floor as her pulse thundered in her ears. The journal explained everything. During the 1940s, the secretly sheltered families traveling west after losing homes during the war years and economic collapse. Travelers often arrived carrying valuables they feared banks would seize or thieves would steal. The innkeeper created hidden storage beneath the building where desperate families could temporarily hide belongings safely. Cellar payments. Over time, many owners vanished. Some never returned. Some died. Some disappeared into history. Eventually, the valuables remained forgotten underground. But Walter had discovered the cellar decades earlier while helping repair part of the foundation. Instead of stealing anything, he protected it, maintained it, waited. The final journal entry was dated only months before his stroke. If Clara ever finds this place again, tell her broken things are still worth saving. Her vision blurred instantly. Inside the journal rested one final envelope addressed in shaky handwriting. For Clara. She opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter. Clara, if you are reading this, life probably became harder than I hoped it would. I wanted to leave you something better. But sometimes all we can leave behind is direction. This one was never valuable because of money. It was valuable because frightened people once found shelter here when the world abandoned them. You understand that feeling now. So if this place becomes yours someday, protect it. Not because of what's hidden beneath it, because of what it gave people when they had nowhere else to go. And because you more than anyone know what that feels like. Grandpa Walter. Clara cried there for a long time beneath the inn, while dust floated silently through flashlight beams around her. Not because of the money, because after years of feeling abandoned, someone had still been thinking about her all along. The months that followed were slow, painfully slow sometimes. Clara reported part of the discovery legally through county officials after investigations and ownership reviews. Much of the abandoned property was eventually awarded to her because no surviving claims remained. But money alone didn't fix her life overnight. The inn still needed massive repairs. Roofs leaked, pipes burst constantly, floors warped. Some mornings Clara became so overwhelmed she sat on the porch fighting tears before forcing herself back to work. But little by little things changed. An older carpenter from town named Ben volunteered occasionally after hearing about the restoration. A waitress from a highway diner brought leftover pies once a week. A retired electrician repaired lighting in exchange for coffee and conversation. People slowly returned to Raven Hollow, not because of treasure rumors, because they felt alive again. Clara restored the dining room first, then several upstairs rooms. She kept her grandfather's journal near the front desk, and beneath the inn she preserved the hidden cellar exactly as she found it. Sometimes at night, she sat alone near the fireplace, listening to the building creak softly around her. No longer frightening, familiar, like breathing. One evening months later, a young woman arrived during heavy rain, asking if there was anywhere cheap she could stay for the night. Clara looked at her trembling hands, the worn backpack, the exhaustion hidden behind embarrassed eyes, and immediately saw herself. "You can stay here tonight," Clara said softly. The woman nearly cried with relief. That night, after everyone slept, Clara walked quietly downstairs toward the hidden cellar. Not because of the money, because of the feeling down there. The stillness, the history, the reminder that forgotten places sometimes carry forgotten kindness too. She touched the old stone wall gently and smiled through tears. Walter had been right. Places remembered things. And maybe people did too. A year earlier, Clara had been sleeping inside a freezing car behind an abandoned gas station, wondering if her life had already ended before it truly began. Now every window inside Raven Hollow glowed warmly at night. Travelers stopped there again. Laughter returned to the halls. Coffee brewed each morning in the old kitchen, and the porch no longer leaned. Sometimes Clara still woke before sunrise and walked outside alone into the cold morning air. The valley remained quiet. Wind still moved through the cottonwood trees, exactly the same way. But she felt different now. Not healed completely. Not perfect. Just rooted again. One winter evening, she repaired an old pocket watch beside the fireplace, using tools that reminded her of her grandfather's hands. Tick, tick, tick. The sound filled the room softly. Alive. For a moment, Clara closed her eyes and listened. Not to the watch, to the inn itself, to the life inside it, to the proof that broken things could survive longer than anyone expected. And sometimes, the people who feel most forgotten are the very ones meant to carry hidden light forward. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more slow burn emotional mysteries like this one. And in the comments, share a memory of someone who once helped you during a difficult season of life. Sometimes small kindnesses echo farther than we ever realize.